Hi, this is Julian for Production Expert. I've got a simple little demo tune that I made. And the thing about this is that all the sounds that you hear in this were made using Concept from Krotos, which is a really nice synthesizer that I've been playing around with recently. And the thing I like about it is that it's kind of accessible to people who aren't very familiar with synthesizers and synthesis and all of that stuff. So we should have a look and see what we've got here and how it was put together. I made all of the sounds in that with one exception, which is this one here, Ambience of Doom, which looks like this. The thing about this sound is that it's complex. There's a lot going on. There's lots of cyclic elements to it. And it's all happening basically because of modulation. That's the thing that's right front and centre about Concept. The other thing about Concept is that you can see everything that's happening all in a single window. It's quite important to the design process with this to keep stuff accessible and modulation being very visual. So because of that, I just think it's perfect for people who aren't that familiar with synthesis and want to create sounds and don't want all that front-loaded, I don't know what I'm doing, what is this, why is it making that noise kind of stuff to happen. What we've got here is we've got these 4 modulation slots and this one Tweak It, which we can have a look at later. But they're all pretty much the same, but the really important thing is the colour, the use of colour. Red relates to red, purple relates to purple, etc. And there's some different things that you can do. I don't think we'll necessarily have a look in this one because there is quite a bit of stuff happening. Instead, what I think we'll do is we'll have a look at a simpler patch and then come back to this and see how it relates. Here we are in an initialized patch. Sounds like this. And there's not a great deal going on, to be honest. We've got some oscillators here that create the basic sounds that you hear. We've got some filtering, and that's basically it. We've got one envelope which controls how quickly the sound comes in and then goes out again in terms of its loudness. But we've got these modulators, and let's have a look at those straight away. We've got an LFO, low frequency oscillator. We can make things change in some way. We can change a parameter over time, up and down in a kind of cyclic way. And the way you set up modulation is you just grab what you want and drag it to the modulator you want. For example, here, if I grab sustain and I put it over here, you can see the effect straight away. I can change the speed of the modulation. I can change the depth of the modulation. I can do it per parameter like this, which is kind of fun. If I put that one away, if I want to do something else, if I go into this one, let's grab the cutoff of the filter. And let's also grab the resonance of the filter, pull that one down there. But let's do something slightly different with that. Let's, for example, make it go in the opposite direction. So now we've got a sound that sounds like this. Which is pretty predictable modulation, but we are just using one LFO on the filter, which is kind of well-trodden ground. Let's go back to that complex preset and see if it makes more sense now we've seen how modulation works. And here we are back in Ambience of Doom, and if we run this up, we'll see that actually it's all pretty familiar stuff in terms of the modulation and the parameters. There was just more of them, but it's made from the same building blocks. For example, we've got an LFO, and if we click on here, we'll see that the oscillator 2 frequency and the oscillator 1 frequency are both in red, and we see they've got different ranges set, but they're basically the same. The filter resonance is up here, and that's also in red. We've got the mix control of the flanger. If we come down here, we'll see that in here somewhere as well, flanger mix. We'll have a look at the other modulation sources another time, but let's have a look at how you can use these to create a sound as used in this little demo. So, back in the tune again, and when we get to this repeating section, we'll hear this bass line that comes in. That's what we're looking at here. This is the bass patch. And there it is. Now, you might think that that's individual sequence notes, but actually it's not. The thing that's causing that octave drop is the modulation. Let's have a look at how it works. So looking around this patch, I can see 2 colours. I can see red and I can see green. Red is the first LFO and green is the second LFO. They're both square waves. So the red one here is modulating oscillator 1 gain, and its range is turned right up. So we can see pretty much it's just turning that oscillator on and off. It's modulating it. If I turn oscillator 2 off, we'll just hear this one on its own. Sounds like this. That's kind of quite cool, actually. It's got a little spit at the beginning of it because of the modulation. If we look at the same thing, but on oscillator 2, and we switch oscillator 1 off, we've got the opposite thing. What we've got is that's the timing's the same, but I've inverted the modulation depth. So this one's turning on when the other one's turning off. They're both the same LFO, but they're affecting the parameters in the opposite direction compared to each other. So that means that I either hear oscillator 1 or I hear oscillator 2. Okay, so let's have a look at another simple patch not using too much modulation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, we'll come back to the beginning of the track, and here I've got this patch here, which is bass drop. This one sounds like this. It's a bass drop. And what we've got is it's one modulator, only one modulator. We've got this envelope controlling detune on oscillator 1. Oscillator 2 isn't even on. So what we've got is, if I come in here and turn this off, I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm just going to switch off the modulation. Without that modulation, all I've got is I've got this amp envelope. So this is an envelope. First time we've spoken about envelopes. Envelopes play through once and they change the level of a parameter over time from beginning to end, key press to key release. And that's all it is. And then we see it starts all of a sudden and then it gets quieter and quieter as the decay comes down. We could speed it up even more, so it's got a spit at the beginning. But it's the decay is the thing that's making sure that that note is finished in, 2.8 seconds in this case. That's quite significant because here I've got this envelope, which is modulating the tuning of this oscillator, which is causing the pitch of the oscillator to fall because it is being affected negatively. The modulation value is inverted. So if it was the right way up, pitch would rise. But instead, it's going the other way. Which is bringing this nice pitch drop effect. Now, what's quite important is that I do want this envelope here to be a little bit shorter than this envelope here, because what I want to hear is I want to hear it falling and falling, and for it still to be falling when the sound disappears, because the amplitude has turned the level all the way down. If it didn't do that, then you'd hear a static note at the bottom, which I don't think would work as well. One other little thing I've got in here, which is quite nice, is I've got a little bit of drive dialed in, just on this second envelope. Now, it's fairly subtle. Let's hear it without. We've still got a pitch drop, but if you're listening on little earbuds or maybe on a phone, you probably didn't hear that because it's all way too deep. We've got a sine wave here, and there's not a great deal going on. Now, if I dial in this filter, the filter's not really doing anything. The filter's in circuit, but it's way too high to affect such a deep subby sound. But I'm using the drive and modulating the drive so that as the sound progresses, the drive's getting turned up, introducing more and more harmonics, basically making that drop easier to hear as it gets lower. So as it disappears off the bottom of the response of a smaller set of speakers, it gets some additional harmonics on top, making it easier to hear as it goes. And it's just helping with audibility. So let's hear without, compared to, and we can see that's really ramping in as we go. So there we go. There's two of the sounds that are in this little demo, and they're both simple examples using one or two modulators and showing how you can quickly and easily set up and understand what's going on in a patch in Concept.